What's going on, guys? Sensible Prepper Live, Prepper School, Volume 41. 41.
Rolling in with our hair on fire today.
Yeah, we kind of popped in here at the last minute, which is our typical. But I hope you guys are doing well. We're going to be talking about storms. And obviously, we've just gotten through Ian, or still dealing with that. Mm-hmm. And so we just thought we'd kind of throw some things out there. We have Robbie Wheaton with us today, gunsmith for over 20 years. Former Marine or still a Marine, whatever. Yeah. People fuss at you if you say former Marine.
Just Boy Scouts for big kids.
Just a leather neck right here. And great to have him with us. He has WheatonArms.com, which they do Glock aftermarket parts, but he also does custom gun work. So if you need RMR cuts, slide cuts, things like that, I mean, this is the guy to talk to, and he stays pretty busy. But one of the things about his Glock aftermarket parts are his flat face triggers. They are phenomenal. So just going to throw that out. Plus, you're doing all the work for the aftermarket parts for daggers.
Yeah, we've got a new trigger assembly that we're getting ready to release, or Palmetto State Armory is getting ready to release for their dagger. And brought my buddy here one today so he can play with it. But it's a complete trigger kit. Work with any of your Gen 1 through 4 Glocks or the PSA daggers. But it's a pretty cool trigger.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool that PSA is that says a lot about his product. So PSA is using those for their upgrades on their daggers, which is really cool. Also, he has Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel, so check that out. We'll have a link down below in the description. And we also appreciate Sarah Mack. She's over looking over questions and comments. And if you have questions, go ahead. You can go ahead at any time and ask them. And she's kind of monitoring those questions. So when we take a break, we're ready to go. With Ian just coming through, mm-hmm. I mean, it's devastating. We missed most of the effects. We had quite a bit of wind, but some rain. It wasn't a big deal.
Not a big deal for us here. A lot more further south and east from where we are down toward the coast. They got quite a bit more storm there than we did, but just a little wind and a little rain for us here.
Yeah, we really were spared, but a lot of people, it's really affected everything about their life. Yep. And so, right now, of course, the storm, again, they're dealing with the aftermath, but the storm's gone. But this is the thing, is storms are coming. They do come. Now, one thing about Florida is they had a kind of a reprieve for a while.
Well, they have. And then, they get this one, which was the worst hurricane to ever hit the state of Florida. Not necessarily because of the power of the hurricane, but because of the size of it. It covered such a large area and just a ton of destruction within the state, right, with the wind and with flooding. And it's just an awful mess down there right now.
Yeah, it really is. And, of course, it gave the Gulf a break. The Gulf seems to have been getting hit every time, at least the Louisiana area, that whole area right in there. But, we're going to talk today about some things because, guys, here's the problem is a lot of times we know that we live in these areas that are prone not just for hurricanes. And this doesn't apply just to hurricanes, but we're going to kind of have an emphasis toward it. But tornadoes, which are spawned off of hurricanes.
Yep.
And just the flooding that goes on, snowstorms. I mean, there's a lot of different things that disrupt your utilities and your services. And obviously, the biggest thing about a hurricane is the water and the surge.
That's right. The tidal surge is extremely destructive, even more so than the wind. The wind tears up a lot of stuff, but then you get that tidal surge that comes in. It floods everything. It knocks out the power. It knocks down buildings. It wrecks and ruins millions of dollars worth of cars. The tidal surge is just, and then it takes the tidal surge days or weeks to finally recede and the water levels to get back to normal.
Right. Right. It was funny. I saw one video on Instagram where I think it was Fort Myers. They had sharks swimming in the streets. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, great. Or alligators or, it brings out a lot of that kind of stuff. So, one of the things about it, there is a threat assessment and you look at the different things that can go on, the different effects that can happen. And that way you can make your plan. Now, there's people that evacuate, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. There are people that bunker in, talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of reasons. One of the things I think, and really we want to talk about bunkering in, is, you've decided you're going to ride it out. you said, you know what, I'm going to ride this out because maybe you have a lot of things there, that you can't leave. I mean,
worried about looting,
about really just total destruction. One of the sad things with flooding is once it floods in, the structure's pretty much done for.
That's right.
And so, it's just it's a terrible thing. But on the other hand, I have a lot of friends that bunkered in, and they said they were getting it, and then ended up just getting some minimal damage. And so then are they going to leave everything they have and then come back to an empty house because they've been looted? It's really a bad situation all the way around. I think that DeSantis headed off a lot of the excessive looting just by making a lot of statements and standing firm. And I think that was a big plus. But as we saw what happened in Katrina, when the mayor of New Orleans went and put out a confiscation of firearms, and it really put a lot of people in danger. And a lot of people were killed down there for various reasons. In fact, I have friends of mine that were killed down there, which is, one of those things. And we're going to talk about risk. Avoidable risk is just very important to consider, but you've got to weigh it out because we just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, and that's the big thing, especially with hurricanes. You don't know a lot of times what path it's going to take until it takes that path. There's all these different models and projections. It's going to go this way. It's going to go that way. And, you really don't know for sure which direction the hurricane's going to go until it goes. I mean, up until the hurricane came through Florida and up the coast, it was predicted to, we were supposed to get tropical storm winds all the way up here where we live. And we're a few hundred miles off of the coast. We were supposed to get really bad winds and rain and flooding and everything where we live all the way up until the day that it was supposed to hit. And it hit the coast and turned and followed the coast up instead of coming inland where we are.
Right. And even South Carolina coast really got hit strong. Charleston and Myrtle Beach, which that's where we vacation a lot down there. And I have friends in Myrtle Beach that were sending me pictures. And I mean, the devastation, even the place we're going to be at in November, the surge shut that whole place down. So, and so that may or may not happen. But let's talk about it, because here's the thing, guys, and I see this every time. Something's coming, especially hurricanes. We have a little more warning with hurricanes. And as the storm gets ready to come, all of a sudden people run out to buy their supplies.
Right.
And typically they wait till the last minute to start buying up supplies, and then things are gone. So first off, and guys, this is also this. I mean, we don't know when things can happen. We don't know when hurricanes are going to happen, or, even in the Pacific, where there's typhoons, whether it's, surges, tsunamis. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on, and these are everyday events. This is not something that's, we're preparing for the end of the world. No, these are things that happen every day, and it ends their world. It's their personal SHTF.
They're seasonal events. We're in the hurricane season up through about December. Out west, their wildfire season is starting to wind down out there now. You always have the threat of tornadoes during the spring and summer and fall throughout the Midwest and the breadbasket of the country. Earthquakes is always an issue. There's always earthquakes. We've had a ton of them here in South Carolina this year. Nothing huge, but a lot of them. And there's always natural disasters that can occur year round.
Right. And so with that being said, we need to plan ahead of time. And that's the number one thing is, guys, what you can. A lot of people run out and buy plywood and things like that. If you live in an area that's prone to hurricanes, I mean, if I lived in Louisiana area, that whole area, I would have plywood stocked up and stacked up.
That's right.
You have hurricane shutters is a big thing that's come up now. That's great because you just close it up. You don't have to board up your house. There are things you can do to get ready for it. Now, one thing that we have, we make sure that we have those supplies on hand, but, a lot of times people do procrastinate. And that's probably one of the biggest things is you kind of wait. Guys, get your storm stuff together. Last year we had a lot of snowstorms and we bought this big, we talked about this before, but it's just a huge container. And inside there we have extension cords, we have lanterns, we have, all kind of different tools that we need. And we have that box always set aside. When this storm was coming up, even though that box was planned for winter storms, it was very useful if we had any issues for any kind of storm. And so have the supplies ahead. You're going to have some power outages here and there. If you live in California, you're going to have more power
Yeah,
outage than
that's
you
right.
have it on. And that's just kidding. But
But not really.
no, not really. I mean, it's pretty pretty serious what's going on out there.
Yeah, when you're trying to charge your electric car and your electric lawnmower and your electric chainsaw and
with a gas powered generator.
With a gas powered generator. Yeah.
Oh man, people. But the thing is having the supplies ahead of time. I mean, that is just key, and it's great to have at all times. Because guys, last week we had a couple of power outages just out of nowhere, and because the infrastructure, people are moving in, and they had just boom, power went out. Didn't go out for long,
right?
But it went out, and it can go out at any time, day or night. And so a lot of these things do apply to any kind of power outage. One thing too is, especially like if I lived in Florida and a hurricane's coming, we have supplies we need, but we also have high valued items.
Right.
What do you do when you have a lot of guns? You're going to take them all with you. And,
it's like a lot of the people that live down there with really expensive cars. They put their cars inside in their buildings, but then the buildings flooded and destroyed the cars anyway.
Right.
It would be the same way with the firearms collection or any type of collection that is too large to be able to load up last minute and transport. There's a good chance you may lose it.
Right. And, and it's all kind of valuables. It's not necessarily just your firearms. It's, it's of course your ammunition, and then you have other things that are heirlooms. I remember we did a video a while back about the pioneers and out there on the trail. And one of the things that was kind of noted a lot was that they would find these really nice, like pianos and these things that were family heirlooms ditched on the side of the trail, because after a while it was just putting a lot of strain. And so you've got to kind of pick and choose. You can't necessarily carry everything. And guys, remember this when you're thinking about bugging out, because bugging out is the same thing. I mean, you're bugging out, you're leaving all your supplies and everything at home. For those that were preppers down there, the water destroys.
Yeah.
It'll destroy everything. And so, putting that thought ahead of time. So, preparing to maybe put those up above,
right?
Getting them out of if you have a second story
or an attic.
Yeah.
Yep.
But then again, the winds come and tear that right off.
It's a double-edged sword. You get it above the water, but you still got to worry about the wind destroying everything.
Right. I mean, it just makes it, crazy. But one thing, of course, first off, is you harden your house. You do whatever you can. And, again, the surge, it's kind of hard to do that.
Yeah.
This is below the level. But harden your house as much as you can. Of course, the hurricane shutters, plywood, different things like that, and get it protected as well as you can.
Yep. Sandbags and barriers, things that can slow the water down from getting into your home is a big thing.
Right. Because, let's face it, guys, that's millions of dollars worth of damage. And yes, insurance companies do come in, but then again, you lose your valuables. Now, so with that being said, one thing to do is to make sure you list the items that you have, especially valuable items, but really most of your items. Have a list of those things set aside, because your insurance company, when they come in, if you don't have a list, it's just your word against theirs.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you have that. Make sure that you have your important documents set aside, protected, in some way.
Well, one of the big things too is not just having a list, but having a list of items and making sure that your insurance will cover those items. A lot of times insurance will only cover X amount of dollars when it comes to firearms. It may be 500, 1,000, 10,000, whatever is written into your policy. But a lot of times your insurance will only cover a certain dollar amount toward firearms. And then your accessories and stuff, they may not cover those things at all. So if you've got a lot of firearms and accessories, it may be something to look into getting a rider policy that would extend your coverage to all of your firearms in case they do get damaged or destroyed.
Right. That's right. And because NRA, I know that they offer just to join, they offer a certain amount, but it's low. And you can actually go to that provider and get more coverage. And one thing that I avoid is having to list my firearms and serial numbers to the insurance company. I don't want them knowing everything that I have, but that may be, maybe your only option to protect those things. But having that information, when we had our break-in here at the house, one thing that I'd had this bag stolen, and it had all this gear in it, and it was expensive. It was about $600, $700 worth of stuff in that bag. what was funny is I had just done a video and had listed everything in that bag. And so I gave that to the insurance company. They refunded me. They paid for that.
Yep.
But if I hadn't had it, I would have just been out of luck, because I'm like, well, I had this, zero tolerance certain knife is worth $300, and it'd been like, yeah, right.
And video documentation, if you're in a hurry and don't have time to be able to go through and write everything down and list everything, video documentation of all of your items is an easy reference to be able to go back and be able to record those items later.
That's a great idea. And you can put it on a cloud, so you don't have to have it physically, and you can protect it that way. Let's see, having a blackout box. Now I talked about the big box. That's the big storm box. We're on, all hell's breaking loose. We got that.
Break out the snow sleds.
Yeah, break out the snow sleds. Get your generator prepared. Get it ready. Make sure that it's running. It's one of the things I did before, because I left this weekend to go to Tennessee to tactical response. So I was going to be gone during the weekend. So Shannon and the kids were here. And so, I went back, made sure the generator had, we had fuel for it, made sure that it was running, got it started. I made sure that Shannon knew how to start it and all those things. But, you may need to be able to pass that information along. Where are your emergency shutoffs? How can you shut your power off? How do you shut your water off? Because you could have a bust, a main to bust, or you could have some problems. You could have something in the house, and of course you can have power. So you need to cut that power off if you have a loose power line. And so being able to make sure that they also, not just you, because something can happen to you or you may not be there.
Right. And, a lot of times if you do have a power outage, it's a good idea to throw your main breaker into your home, just because as the power starts to come back on, you may get surges of power, which can trip your circuit breakers or even blow stuff up or destroy things inside your home.
Yeah, damage your computers.
Protected.
That's one thing. Computers are very susceptible to those power surges.
That's one thing that we always try and do is if there's a power outage, we'll go out and I'll throw the main breaker on the house. That way, when the power does come back on, I'll give it a little while, make sure my neighbor's lights are on, and then I'll go flip my switch.
But, just doing little things. And sometimes we don't think about it, because for me the other day, I didn't even think about that.
Yep.
So that's a good point. But anyway, the blackout box is something that I keep for just regular power outages. And usually that occurs when there's some kind of storm, but it can happen when a car hits a transformer, a pole or something has an accident. But we keep this box, and we have, in fact, you can look it up, Blackout Box, on our, with a little magnifying glass on the channel page. But it has just the essentials. It has some flashlights, some batteries. It has it's not tarps, but it has the heavy meal trash bags, which you like to keep. Yep. And, maybe a rain jacket, just some things that you're going to need with little small lanterns and things like that. And it's just a small box. It's one of the MTM 50 caliber boxes, and there's a lot you can pack in there. So when something goes out, you're not stumbling around. You go right to it. You got it, and you're ready to go. So that's a huge one. Now, drinking water. Having drinking water, because that can all get contaminated in a storm, especially with flooding. Flooding, whether it's a hurricane or just regular flooding. We've had a lot of that this year.
Well, and like with a hurricane, it pushes in a lot of seawater, and that seawater can contaminate your freshwater drinking supplies for weeks or even months at a time.
Yeah,
until they can get all of that, get it desalinated and purged and flushed back out. So having fresh water is very important.
And that's regardless if you have damage to your place or not. You could have been outside of the actual, main zone, the impact zone, and still have problems getting fresh water and things like that, gasoline, all these kind of things. Make sure your cars are filled up too with gas.
Ahead of time.
Yeah, because you may need to head out. A couple of years ago, we were down at the beach and a hurricane was coming in and we didn't know what was going to happen. So we got a room about 40 miles out, jumped in the car and took off and spent the night there. And then when it was done, we went back, and it was very minimal. There wasn't a whole lot, but they didn't know. So, sometimes you got to weigh out again, whether to evacuate or whether to not evacuate. And that's a tough one, especially when you have your family there. Should I, especially small kids and things like that, should I get on the road? And if you do, you need to make that decision pretty early. Because once the roads get jammed up, you don't want to be stuck on the freeway when that thing hits. And so, I saw a lot of video where there were people just bumper to bumper, but make sure that your car is full of gas. And one of our rules around here is you never let it get below a half a tank, but we like to keep it at 3/4 of a tank.
Mm-hmm.
Always keeping gas in your car, ready to go, prepared to go. Okay, tools. Your chainsaws. Having power tools, are great, but if you don't have any power, you need to make sure you have some hand tools. One thing I'd heard was, especially in Katrina, and I haven't heard all the stories now from Ian, but there were people that water came up. There was one family that died in their house because the water surged and they couldn't get out, and they drowned. It was like 5 or 6 people, and they drowned because the water went on past the ceiling and they couldn't get out of the house. And the doors wouldn't open because of the water pressure. So, having something to break free. There was one guy that was in his, or at least one, they got up into their attic and they thought, okay, I'm in my attic. And then the water started coming up.
Right.
What I would suggest is, for your storm emergency tools, is to have an axe or something in your attic just placed over there. And if for some godforsaken reason that you end up being in your attic, you've got a way to break out of your attic. And that would apply also to a home. If that family had some way to break the wall down, to cut the wall, they might have survived.
I'll tell you one thing that I've always thought about in a situation like that is, if I bunkered in and the storm waters did start to rise, I'm a big fan of the Sawzall.
Oh yeah,
a battery operated Sawzall. If you've got a battery operated Sawzall, you go up into your attic and you're stuck up there, and the water level starts rising. You can cut a hole big enough in just a couple of minutes with a Sawzall, where with an axe, you may be limited in your swinging motion and everything. Right. If the attic's smaller or compact, even with a hatchet, it could take you, a lot of time to be able to chop a hole out. But with a Sawzall, you can rip a hole really, really quickly with those to be able to escape if you had to.
Yeah, that's a good point. So they also make the circular saws that are like that. I've got one, and you can get up there and just cut that out.
That's it.
But having some means of escape. Also, crowbars or pry bars. When damage happens, especially wind damage, when the house collapses, people can get trapped. And so having some tools to be able to leverage and get big items off of them, where you just can't lift it, and be able to at least give them enough to where you can pull them out. And so, and hammers, different things like that. Just have those tools. A lot of us have some of these tools, but do we know where they are? Are they ready? And so when the storm comes, go ahead and, while you're preparing, get those tools out and ready. Just like for us, we keep our big winter prep box in storage. And so the last week, it was like, okay, we need to get the storage box out. So Sarah Mack and I went over and got in there, pulled that big old huge box up, put it in the back of her truck. We brought it in. And it's one of those things, we can't keep it here because we just don't have a room for it. Because it's just so big, it's just like, and so that way, if you need a storage, and you could even, a lot of us have storage buildings, have storage. So you can keep certain things in there that you're not going to use. But if you have enough notice, you can get to them.
Still easily accessible when you need it.
Right. But like tornadoes, you just sometimes don't know.
Sometimes you don't know.
But if you see them coming, you can go ahead and prepare. For us, we have them coming from the west typically, and they come through, we know they're coming, or they come through Atlanta and they hit us. So we can go ahead and get ourselves prepared.
We normally have a couple of hours warning if there's going to be a big thunderstorm that could potentially spin off tornadoes. So
right.
There's some early warning signs. It's not like all of a sudden the storm just pops up and boom, there's a tornado on top of you. We do, luckily, because of where we live, kind of at the base of the mountain, it's pretty easy to track major storms that come in. They either follow the bottom of the mountain, or they'll hit the mountain and go west of us or north of us.
Right.
So we miss a lot of storms because of the mountain. It's kind of provides a little protective area for us, but there is a buffer zone that we can follow storms a lot of times.
One time I was coming home, and actually it's before my wife and I got married. I was driving down to her house, and that's actually on the property we live on now. But as I was going, I didn't have any idea. And I'm driving, and all of a sudden the rain started, and then it just got super intense to the point you couldn't see anything. And so I ended up just pulling over, and then after about 30 seconds, it kind of passed. And I went on, and when I got down to where they live and where we live now, trees were all down in the road. There were big signs that were ripped up and torn up, and it just hit, and you couldn't even get in. So I had to actually walk to them to check on them, and there were trees down. Thank goodness they were fine, but there were a lot of trees down, a lot of things like that.
They were fine. The trees were not.
Yeah, the trees were not fine, but it became firewood.
Yep.
So you need to have an evacuation plan
Circle of
regardless. Yeah, circle of life. You need to have an evacuation plan regardless if you're going to planning to evacuate or not. Because what you don't want to do is to say, okay, we're hanging here. And then all of a sudden it's like, we got to go. And then you got to run around and get things together. And so, that's a great, and two, guys, you're not working at that point, if you're trying to stay at your home and bunker in. So it's a great time to get everything situated and ready to go. It'll make you have wiser decisions. You won't make, rash panic type decisions. Okay. So let's go to a few questions if you have them, and then we're going to go on to some other things. I'm sorry, sis. I put her on the spot.
David Frost asks, question, I feel like keeping batteries charged is always a pain, especially for backup items. What are the best ways to preserve and keep batteries charged?
Well, we have chargers that we just keep, our batteries going a lot of times. And we're a little bit over the top, but I understand that, it's sometimes if you have limited sources, first thing I would suggest is, getting a system set up. For me, I do a lot of camera batteries, flashlight batteries. I've got all this stuff for what I do. And so I have what I call a battery station, and I have all my charging right there, like radios. You might want to keep your radios charged, or two-way ham radios, whatever. So I like to have a place that I keep all that going on. But let me just say this. I keep standard batteries like CR123s, AA's, AAA's,
non-rechargeables.
Right.
Yep.
And they have a 10-year shelf life. So have that as a backup. If my flashlight goes out, I can throw in a standard battery. If it's an 18650 rechargeable, I can throw in two CR123s. If it's a rechargeable CR123, I've got the Duracells, and I like Duracells. Those are my batteries that I count on. And we have what we call the battery daddy. And it's this pack, and it opens up on both sides, and you can keep all these batteries. And it's just a great resource.
That thing must weigh at least 30 pounds.
It's heavy.
Yeah.
He also asked specifically for generators.
Generators. Well, if you have a an electronic generator or a battery backup generator. Yeah. Like we have a solar generator. And before the storm got out, we got our panels out, we're getting everything up. We're making sure that we can charge our refrigerators, freezers, things like that. And, but yeah, you just have, now I have a buddy of mine that has an inverter, and then he has batteries, big deep cell car batteries, and he keeps those charged. And then he has the inverter, so you can actually power that. So if you have a way to charge your batteries up, it'll give you power that'll store it up. And so that way, you could do that and then have these batteries charged. And then every once in a while, charge these bigger batteries.
Well, for the bigger batteries, one of the things that I like, it's called a battery tender. You plug it into your 110 outlet, you clip it on your battery terminals, and when the battery voltage gets down to a certain level, it'll charge it back up, and it'll maintain that battery and keep charge on that battery all the time.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, but with the technology we have now with batteries, it is going like crazy.
Yep.
Especially now that they're doing a lot of that lithium ion batteries. There are a lot of options out there.
Ralph Rojas asks, question, what is your take on burying large gamma containers with canned food for extended food reserves?
Yeah, well, the thing is if you make sure you keep things in good temperature control and keep them out of the sun, but the gammas are great. The gamma lids are great. It gives you an extra layer of protection. We have some. We don't have a lot. We just have some. But I think they're great. It gives you that extra security. But most of your dried goods right now, if they're just sealed decently, they don't have to be oxygen absorbers. They will last for a long time if kept in good conditions and out of the sunlight. But yeah, I think those are great options.
All right. I got a question for all of you guys out there. And maybe one of you will be able to help me with this. It's just some random thought that I had, squirrel chasing it. But so you've got a electric car, a Tesla. How far can you go in your Tesla if you have a gas-powered generator mounted on a rack on the bumper? Just throwing that out there.
Oh, God. Okay. One more question, and we're going to go back to the list.
Gal asks, question, anything weighing on either of you going into 2023? Things we should look out for?
My gosh. Well, the one thing I'm really concerned about right now, and I've said this, and this can apply to what we're talking about, is food supplies. Everybody's talking about it. I'm talking about like the big world agencies. They're talking about a massive food shortage coming up. Let me just say this, that, we had the rule of threes with water and, all this different stuff, and food comes at 3 weeks without food. But here's the thing, guys, you can treat water, you can boil water, you can do different things, but if food's out, you're out. I mean, either you have big gardens or you have farms near you or something, but otherwise, if you're in an area that's more suburban or even urban for sure, food is going to be your number one thing that you're not going to be able to get. So to me, I highly recommend getting your pantry in order. The problem here is we won't probably starve to death here in the U.S., but it's huge parts of the world that are going to be devastated. And our prices will go up, and we're seeing that. And number two, of course, food is number one. Number two is, crime. Crime is continuing to go through the roof, but that's something we're dealing with.
And as long as you continue to see a downturn in the economy, you're always going to see crime go up. Yeah.
And if you see a lot of these liberal DAs that are doing soft on crime, and it's just going to make it even a lot worse, especially in urban areas. But one thing that I'm somewhat concerned about, and I've been hearing rumblings of it, is with Russia threatening nuclear power, nuclear war, or just they're kind of like limited nuclear war. If Russia sets off a nuclear bomb, the U.S. is going to retaliate. And that to me is one of the scariest things, especially with who's in the White House right now. I'm really concerned that we're going to do something rash. So, and I'm getting mixed signals with this thing in Ukraine. There's like, the Ukrainians are winning. They're throwing the Russians off. And then I'm hearing the Russians are sending 300,000 troops to the border. It's just a very volatile situation there. That is one thing that is my worst nightmare, outside of food. So, there are some things that are coming. And the economy, silver is going up. Silver's going up. It's taking a trip up now. And there's some things about
it's been artificially propped up for quite some time.
It has
to keep it artificially low,
right?
And I think you're starting to see that go away, and the price and the value of silver go up.
Yeah, it should have already gone up.
Yep.
So if you want to protect your wealth, and I say protect it, is to have silver on hand, because the dollar is losing value, silver is going up. So it is a great reason to get silver, and you can barter and trade with it. You can sell it on eBay for that matter.
Yep.
Or wherever you can go to but anyway, those are some of the hot spots. Okay.
Midterms.
Yeah. With midterms coming up, that's something else too. We're going to see how things go politically. And I'm really concerned because, we're getting a lot of signs of some really weird thinking. So I'm hoping that we'll kind of get back, not that it's the savior of the world if the midterms turn, because there's a lot of rhinos up there, but hopefully we can get things going. But on a positive note, the Supreme Court has really been kicking some butt.
They have.
And they've been bringing a lot of great things to the table, especially toward the Second Amendment. And that's a huge plus. I'm really encouraged by what's going on right now. Okay, during the storm. And this is something I just want to touch on because, it's so chaotic, you don't know what's going to happen. But first off, remain calm. Remain calm, especially if you have other family members, and especially if you're the head. And when I say the head of the household, the emotional head of the household, you may be the woman that you need to remain calm. If you remain calm, there'll be a lot less level of panic with everybody else. If you lose it, everybody's going to lose it.
That's right.
So remain calm. I don't care what's going on. Remain calm. Your roof could be ripping off, and take action and do what you need to do, but remain calm. Also, find shelter, have a spot where you're like, okay, if things happen. For us, we have a safe room to where if we have any kind of threats of tornado, we get it ready. We don't always get in it, but we get ready. We had a lot of tornadoes coming over, excuse me, last year. And, Shannon fixed up everything, and we had supplies and all that stuff. And, the storms, they were sighted around us. And so they all got in the safe room. Well, it's right there outside of our living room. So I was laying on the couch with the window open, listening. And Shannon's like, you need to get in here. I said, I'm not getting in there until I hear something, and maybe I was being a little dumb, but but staying calm, being ready to move into shelter when you need to. just don't go along and all of a sudden part of the house is coming apart. And then you're like, go ahead and have a plan set out. Staying out of danger. There were a number of people that were killed with this storm that just took risk.
Right. And, I think a lot of that is because they didn't plan accordingly ahead of time with, okay, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. If this happens, this is what I'm going to do. And you have a plan. You've got contingencies to where if plan A fails, you've got plan B that you can fall back on.
Right.
Plan C you can fall back on. And when you don't have those plans, you panic and you make irrational decisions. Once you make irrational decisions, you put yourself, your family, your friends, anyone that's with you at risk. So you have to make sure that you plan accordingly and have contingencies laid out for different types of scenarios in any type of storm.
Right. That's right. There was one guy that actually, he lived on a canal and there was water flooding everywhere. And so he decides he's just going to go out and see what the canal's doing. And he got washed down the canal. One guy was like reaching through something and fell because he was doing something to, for whatever reason, he was reaching out and he fell and got washed away. Taking risk.
Mm-hmm.
Your family's depending on you. You've got to keep a calm head.
That's right.
Okay, now this is something that we want to talk about, and I kind of want to talk about this a little bit for a minute. Communications.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, cell phone service is really spotty at best. I know even right now, I was talking to somebody this morning, and they had family down there, and they were getting no phone calls, and text were kind of coming in.
I get so my oldest son's down there working right now.
That's right.
And I get maybe one text a day from him, but phone calls, I haven't talked to him on the phone since last Wednesday.
Wow.
Just because of a lot of the cell phone towers are down, a lot of the communications and comms are down. And, we talked about it before the storm hit. He was in Miami and then heading up to Fort Myers from Miami. And I told him, I was like, look, just send me a text. And when you'll get a blip of a signal and it'll push through. So,
right.
And so he sends a text and just waits for it to, a signal to hit and it goes through. And I get a little notification every now and then that, hey, still alive, doing well.
Right. Well, and that's a great point. You may say, oh, I don't really have that much coverage. It's spotty, trying to make phone calls. Just text, because text is your better chance. When we were at Tactical Response, there was hardly any cell service at the range.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would try to send a picture and you can forget it, or do whatever, but I could send text without any problem. So that's a good thing. That is your first line, is if cell service is spotty or out, you may be able to get a text out.
Mm-hmm.
Having a weather radio. Those things are great. I always have my weather radio here. And this is just a Midland. I got this on Sportsman's Guide. And these are just great options. It's rechargeable. It has a hand crank. It's got solar. So you've got some different options. And then, if you needed to, you could put standard batteries in here. But this is great. It has the NOAA weather systems. It has shortwave radio, which you might be able to pick up some things. And you've got just a lot of options. And, of course, the flashlight, But that gives you some good options. But this is just to receive. This is just to receive information, which is important.
Absolutely.
Knowing what's going on around you. Because, just TV stations, your reception may be down. Cable lines might be broken. But
someone said send date and time of your text with your text
Mm-hmm.
to see if it's delayed.
Thank you. That's a great idea, because that way you know what's coming. That's right. With Robbie, I text him sometimes, he didn't get it.
Yeah.
But also two-way radios. Two-way radios are great, especially if you're doing something over here and you have a family member over here and you can kind of communicate back and forth. Two-way radios have a lot of great options. Ham radio is probably one of your better options. But, there's a lot of licensing and restrictions on ham radio.
Right. And if you are involved in a big storm like a hurricane, a lot of times your antenna for your ham can be taken down and you may not have access to that ham radio other than just the handheld model, which really limits your ability to be able to get out.
When, ham towers, because, they have the relay towers. Those could be damaged as well. Now, they try to get those up pretty quickly, because that's an emergency communication source. One, though, that I really want to talk about here is satellite phones. Now, it's one of the things that we've been just kind of looking at. I've been wanting to do it. I've been kind of quick. So I'm not an expert at this, but the satellite radio or phones are starting to come down in price. And so they actually hit the satellites.
Mm-hmm.
Satellites are undamaged; they're up there, so you can typically kind of get a connection with with a satellite phone.
One of the things that my oldest son's been using a lot this summer out west with the wildfires, and now in Florida with the hurricane, is the Starlink.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can get internet access with it. They can still be able to send emails. They can send text, and they can get phone calls a lot of times as well with it as well. So when they're out west, down in a valley somewhere, and they get no reception whatsoever other than someone up on top of the hill with a two-way radio bouncing signals back and forth, they can still get access with Starlink to be able to send messages out.
Okay, that's a great one. Also, you can do text that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an easy way to be able to get information out.
Right.
So satellite not radios, but satellite phones and Starlink and there's a lot of different communications like that. It's one of the things that we will be bringing to you because I am very interested in it. And in fact, last night on Patreon Live, we were just talking, and some of the guys, because they knew what we were going to talk about today, and they were talking about satellite radio or satellite phones. So sat phones. So, we're going to be doing something with that because I think that gives you a really good option and to get into some of that. Again, the prices have been extremely high for a long time. So they're coming down to be more affordable. And so, again, there's a lot of information about sat phones, and I'm not an expert. I have been researching a lot of it, but I think it's something that you might want to check into as well. So communications.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the Starlink, I believe, is going to be the system that we end up going with because you can vehicle mount it. And then you've always got, as long as the satellites are up, you've got communication ability wherever you are.
And that kind of takes out that factor of environment.
That's right.
With storms and things like that, it kind of bypasses that. Of course, I don't know if there's a huge cloud cover, if you're able to get as much, you probably hinder some of the reception, but
it may. And that's some of the research that I have to do on it to see what kind of limitations you can get. Apparently, smoke doesn't limit it very much.
That's good. So, because of the fires out there. So anyway, that's coming because I think that's one of the banes for even any prepper is communication. You need to be able to communicate. And while like in our prepper group, we have a bunch of ham operators, which is very important to have. And that is another tool that you can use. But I think we have to have some other options. And honestly, now this is one thing. There is an app on your phone that you can get that you can have a sat phones app.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, somebody was that. I'm glad I just happened to think about it. They sent it to me this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one possibility. In fact, they sent the link, but I haven't checked everything out about it. So that's one great thing about this is just a little computer, and there's a lot of things that you can use, even if you can't necessarily get reception. If you can get certain things on here, this is a great thing. Even scanners, you can get police scanners, things like that, to be able to have communication, know what's going on.
So I've had one of those downloaded on my phone for years.
Yeah, I've got one too.
Scanner.
It's pretty interesting, actually. But having these, because you may have phone service, and then that way you can utilize this for those emergencies. So there are just a lot of options. Sometimes, though, it can be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah. If you really want to know what kind of crime is going on in your area, download one of the police scanners, and after about 2 or 3 days, you'll probably delete it because you're like, I had no idea.
Yeah. We both have the Ring system that supplements our standard security system. And one of the things, it'll give you a report of what's going on around you, and there'll be alerts. And stabbing 3 miles, shooting 4 miles from your house. I mean, it's like it'll really wake you up. Or go to the Neighborhood Watch website, and it'll have pinpoints of all the different things going on. It's scary
keep you up at night. It will. That's right.
Okay, so during, and also go out. Well, no, that's really for bunkering in. But this is one thing I think I missed is like if you have lawn furniture, things like that, get it stored away. Because if the wind gets it, it's a missile. And it can be a missile on your own house.
Anything that can be a projectile, you want to make sure that you anchor it, secure it, store it to where it's protected and sheltered from the wind.
Right. The other day, when I got up the other morning, I went out and I looked out our window, and we have a pool. And so I was looking out at the pool, and I thought, what is that? Is that a shadow in the middle of the pool? I couldn't tell what it was. It was one of the umbrellas, and it had blown into the pool. Yeah, I know. It looked like a missile had gone in there. So I went over there and then had to get it out. And then I put it up so it would air out, and it blew right back. I was like, come on, man. But those things, especially in a hurricane with a lot of wind or tornadoes even, You
And
know?
it doesn't take a whole lot of wind to get an umbrella up in the air.
Well, Mary Poppins knows that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean,
Imagine being stuck up there.
Yeah, you're flying. Woo! Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, after the storm, is to assess damage, find out what's going on. See where you may have a leak in your roof, you don't even know it.
well, first and foremost, make sure that everyone is okay.
Well, yeah.
Your family, make sure your family's okay, and then assess.
Right.
But yes,
that's right. I stand corrected. I'm just kidding. but yeah, make sure your family's okay. That is number one. Make sure that you get in touch with relatives and let them know that you're okay, because
nearby friends and family, not just people that are living in your home, but nearby friends and family around you. Reach out to them and make sure that they're okay. And then you can start assessing and
then research out like people that live out of state,
right,
and they're worried about you.
Yep.
When we were at Tactical Response this weekend, one of the guys that's one of the instructors, Tim, which I love him, he said, yeah, my mom lives down there, my sister, and he said, I hadn't heard from him yet. So I'm really, he was really waiting to hear what was going on. So friends and family, very important. Thank you. Of course, again, assess the damage. And make sure that like we had a leak in one of our roofs of our storage buildings, and it was one that we just had stuff put in there just to store, and we hadn't noticed it. And then when we went in there doing stuff, we noticed there was a hole in the roof where a limb had come down. So that had been going on for a while, actually. So it can cause a lot of damage. But okay, and then number 2 is help your neighbors, or number 3, help your neighbors. Just go out and help them. If you have a chainsaw, work together, show some brotherly love, because it's very important. And you may need help. So
community support.
Come. Yeah, be willing to help. Chattanooga had a bunch of tornadoes a couple of years ago and just devastated huge areas. And I have a brother-in-law that's in the ministry up there, and they set up this huge thing where they were helping people, feeding people, doing for others. And there will be typically a lot of support. Robbie's son's down there right now, doing and working and helping people. Church groups, a lot of times, people go down and help. I've done that a number of years, going down with different storms and things like that to help people. And so, typically, and that's one of the things about a storm, is you have unaffected areas that come in and support you. Mm-hmm. If you have something that's a national or world disaster, you may not have that relief. But that's one of the things with storms. Typically, people rally together, they come in and help. So be that first person. You're right there. You're the first responder in a sense. So go ahead and jump in and help people. And so if you have medical supplies, things like that, that also helps. A few years ago, I had a boy get in touch with me. He was down in Mississippi, Alabama area, where they had all those storms come through. And he was a college student. And he said, I watched your video on the bug out bag, so I built one. And he goes, and then a couple of weeks later, he said the tornadoes were coming. And he goes, where's my bug out bag? And he grabbed it, and his 3 roommates got in the center of the house. And he sent me a video of this. And when he came out, there were big, huge trees inside his house, just crashed in. And so they got out, and it was a 12-mile walk because the roads were blocked with trees everywhere. And they walked for 12 miles. And he said one thing, he said that bag, he goes, we had water, we had some things in there we used. He goes, but we had a medical kit in there. And he goes, we helped a number of different people and, along the way. And he said that was huge. So, have your medical kit not only for yourself, but also for other people. And, when storms really can bring out some of the best and the worst, but it can bring out mostly the best. And again, avoid unnecessary risk. If you have a power line that's down, you don't want to go over there and stand in the water with it and whatever. And sometimes there are risks that you need to take. Yeah. You need to take it, but
and some of that situational dependent. You may have to take a risk for a friend or a family member or even a complete stranger. To save their life. But that's one of those things that you have to weigh out, is the risk going to be worth the reward?
Well, I had a friend of ours, her son, they were down at Katrina, and her son, he had a little dog, and they couldn't find the dog, and they were looking, and he said, hey, I can't leave until I get the dog. And so then he went to save the dog, and he drowned, and the dog drowned. Mm-hmm. So you got to, you just got to figure things out, and that affects people for the rest of their lives. Okay. Looters are definitely something that, and a lot of people put up, looters will be shot, and all that kind of stuff. I would probably do that myself. You need to have kind of a little bit of a show of force if you have people coming around that are looting. And so, and those are the people that a lot of times are the reason you don't leave.
Mhm.
You know, having the right stuff,
Yep.
and if you're building a good community, you've got friends that'll help you out.
And that's one of the things that I really haven't seen any of in Florida with this hurricane is looting.
They did arrest. I saw where they arrested 5 people.
Okay.
That were together.
Yep.
But that was just one incident.
Yep.
You're right. I haven't seen it either.
Because it's like Katrina. I mean, it was rampant.
Yeah.
It's like the entire city just turned on itself, and they're stealing everything they can possibly steal. And you really haven't seen large cases of that in Florida. Sure, you're always going to have a pocket here or there, but to see it on a large scale like you did at Katrina during Katrina, it's been really nice not to see that in Florida during this hurricane.
It's not been headlines,
right?
And it was headlines in Louisiana. Okay, and then let me see what I got in my bottom one there. Okay, yeah. Even though the storm's over, there's damage, you need to have some supplies kind of set aside to where if you need to leave, you can. And the one thing about having the Red Cross and different agencies and people coming together, soup kitchens, there's a lot of support, but you may need to head out and get to a shelter somewhere. Let's go to some questions. I'm sorry, Sarah Mack's like, I usually try to give her a warning.
Daniel Cambron asked, how would you prioritize getting food, water, filtration, security, power, communications, tools, shelter?
Well, considering the volatile nature of a hurricane or any storm, you could have your supplies put over here, and that could be where everything's damaged. I would look for the strongest place in the house, the most least susceptible to damage.
Yep. And I agree with that completely. That's going to be something that's going to be fluid, and it's going to be totally storm dependent. Your food and water, obviously, shelter are going to be very important, but everything else down below that is going to kind of flow up or down just depending on how you're impacted by the storm.
Yeah, and as far as prioritize, I mean, you just have to go by the rule of threes. Water is vastly important in that situation, and of course, your tools, having them accessible, and communications, and then looter control on that end.
NMR asks, question, is there a way to get water in a desert-y location if you don't have a well or water source nearby? Is buying and transporting water to your location the only answer?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the only answer, but you're very limited.
Right. For like long-term water, absolutely. You can have some surveys done of your land and see if there's some if it can be drilled and put a deep water well in. That's always a potential option. But as far as like long-term water storage, short of you've got X number of plants that you can seep some water out of, and even moisture from the air that you can collect. But all of that is going to be pretty minimal for everyday water supply. Trucking it in without a well is probably going to be your best option.
Yeah, cactus are actually one source that are actually can save you. I have a buddy of mine that I think he was in Arizona in a pretty desert area. He and his son were hiking in, and they couldn't find water. He did have a K9 Pro filter, and they came up on this trough, a water trough, and the water looked like, you didn't want to drink that water. And he said, I just went, okay. And he said he filtered it out and drank it. And he said it was fine. It was good. So having a good quality water filter system, if you do find some kind of water source. And sometimes, there are oasis kind of places, where there is some water that from natural aquifers or whatever. And you'll just have to find them. But what's funny is in a lot of those places, they don't allow rain catchment systems.
Right.
That's against the law. So, that's a tough one, and we don't live in arid situations, so it's not one that that's been high on our list of knowledge.
Stephen Doe asks, any recommendations for portable solar kits or generators?
Portable
solar kits.
Oh, solar kits.
Yep.
The Humless generator. We have one. It is awesome, and we've got the solar panels that come out, and then it packs up really nice. It's not a huge unit. It's really quiet. I really like that system. I should do it. Well, actually, we've done a lot of work to put together a review. But one thing we tested was our freezer, our refrigerator freezer that we have out in our garage, and it kept it cold. It was like 8 hours, wasn't it, sis? Where it kept it running. So one thing I would also recommend if you need to replace a refrigerator or a freezer, the technology that has really stepped up. We just bought a freezer, a stand-up freezer, and it has a system that if the power goes out, it seals up.
Yeah.
And it will keep your food frozen for 5 days. So it may be that you don't need a freezer, but you're minded that way. You may want to go get one. They're not cheap. It was $1,000 or whatever. But it's a great way to keep it long, because most power outages are short term. They get the power back on after a few days. It can go longer, but it gives you more options. And keep your freezers and refrigerators closed. But there are some propane options, some dual fuel options with generators, which we're big about propane.
That's right. Absolutely.
That's one of the things we do. We keep propane here in the big tin, or the big cans, or even in the small ones, because it's very stable. But solar generators, there's a lot of options, and you can go on to Lowe's and Home Depot, places like that, and they have a bunch of options. So
especially on, not necessarily in the store, but on their website, there's a lot of options for solar charging, solar stations on their website.
Right. So check that. That's a good resource.
JD Prepping Airy asks, what brand propane heater should I buy to use in my house?
Well, you got to be careful with ventless or vented.
So it really depends. If you're looking for a propane system that's going to heat your entire house, check with one of your local gas log places or propane supply stores, and a lot of times they can make recommendations for ventless propane or ventless natural gas heaters that you can put in your house that will heat your entire house.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we do as far as short term is the Mr. Heater Buddy, and we got that on Sportsman's Guide. You get a $20 off every $100 more purchase. I know some of you guys, they've done a lot of sponsorships, and we're doing some different stuff with them right now. But that's a great resource, and you can use it in the house. But you've got to be careful, because if you put a standard like shop type propane heater, you can get carbon monoxide poisoning. Right. I mean, it is not good. So you got to make sure that it's one. The Mr. Heater Buddy is definitely one. And I was going to put a review out, but it started turning warm when I got to it, and so I'm going to do one for the fall. That is
this weekend to be a great time to do a review on it. Saturday, I think the high is only supposed to be 60 and maybe down in the 30s at night.
Wow!
So Saturday may be a good time.
Yeah, maybe, because it's getting that time, ahead of time. But there are a lot of options out there. But again, you want to make sure that it is rated for home inside the house. You don't, because it'll kill you.
Right? It's got to be ventless.
Elizabeth Wilkes asks, "Will a Sawzall work underwater?" We're talking about.
No, most of those are they're battery operated, and they're not made to run underwater. So if you tried to run it underwater, the water would short circuit the electronics in it. And so far as I know, I don't think anyone makes a waterproof Sawzall that will actually work underwater.
Right.
So you would, if you had to use one in case of a storm like that, you were trapped in the attic, you would have to cut the hole before the water level reached the saw and shorted it out.
Stephen Anhalt asks questions. See a lot of power backups in the market. Any idea for a budget-friendly, reliable unit for like microwave, toaster, etc.? Love y'all.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
It's not something that I have done a lot of research on.
Yeah, we've just got it's like a 9,000 watt gas generator that we use for short term. If the power is going to be down for a few days, we've got the 9,000 watt gas generator that we use for short term stuff.
Right.
And it'll run. I think it's got like 4 220 outlets on it and 8 or 10 110 outlets.
Right.
So it'll power a lot of stuff in your home at one time.
One thing I would recommend, and it's with anything, is to look at the reviews.
Yep.
Especially those, and you want to look at the negative reviews. You don't want to look at just the positives.
3 stars and below.
Yeah, because those are the ones. I mean, a lot of guys get on there, oh yeah, love it, and they just pulled it out of the box.
For me, I think the 2, 3, and 4 star reviews are your most honest reviews that you get from people. 5 stars are generally people that just love everything. 1 star reviews are people that hate everything. The 2 star reviews are your accurate reviews that you get, 2, 3s, and 4s.
Yeah, and be careful, not those real negative Nellies.
Yeah.
You got to be careful because sometimes it doesn't matter what it is; they're just not going to like it.
Skip the 1s and 5s.
Yeah,
and you know, too, when you're looking at how much power you need to provide for different things in your house, look at the amount of watts that the item requires to be able to power it, whether it's a refrigerator, microwave, or whatever. The watts are what you need to be looking at when you're building out your power grid, whether it's solar or gas-fired generator or whatever.
right. Okay, so time is up. We really appreciate all the great questions, and guys, I know again, keep your prayers toward the people that are dealing with this storm right now. I mean, it's tough, and you know, and there is a lot of support going on down there, so hopefully they can get back on track soon. But we really appreciate Robbie Wheaton for being here, and just, you know, a lot of knowledge. But again, check out WheatonArms.com, and then his YouTube channel, Robbie Wheaton, or Wheaton Arms. You can put in either one.
Find it either way.
But we'll have a link down below in the description regardless. Also, what we talked about today, the list is down below in the description if you want to reference anything. And always great to have comments in the comment section, because a lot of times people have personal experiences that'll give you insight. And we always find a lot of great information down there. And it makes just a better community. We also appreciate Sarah Mack for putting everything together and getting the questions organized, even if I gave it to her on short notice this time. We try to do better. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. This will also be on the Prepper playlist, and you can check that out. So be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.